Where to start is a good question. The apparel industry has been facing several headwinds recently, and now we have the latest blow, which is the 30% tariff on top of prevailing tariffs, of course. Can you tell us how bad it is, how serious it is?
Sure. The US tariff one is a big challenge to us. And I think the point is that the 30% tariff, which is what is the currently indicated number. So Sri Lanka, we look at countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia as kind of countries with whom we compete for US business. So the challenge for Sri Lanka is where does that our number end up in relation to the number of these competing countries. So the important thing for Sri Lanka is to make sure that between now and the 1st of August, which is the deadline, that we are able to negotiate a deal that brings us into a closer level with our competitor countries. Additionally, whilst the US is 40% of our business, it's also important to note that there's a number of brands we will then ship to third-party countries. So for example, if we're making for a US brand in Sri Lanka and that brand has an outlet in China or Korea or Australia, we will ship directly to there. So this is a significant part of our industry. And if there is a differential tariff that is significant, then our US business will move to those countries. Some products in the shorter term, some products in the longer term. So yeah, it's a big challenge.
We still have time to make this slightly better.
That's correct. So if you look at the letter that President Trump sent out to our president, the one that's very much on social media, but if you read that carefully, it even talks about the fact that this can be continuously negotiated. The US can put it up, put it down. So I think we're entering in a world where there won't be a very definite cutoff that says at this date, that's it, no more negotiations. So I think this is going to be a debate that we're going to be having for the next few months.
The latest blow from the US to the apparel industry is causing quite a stir. We spoke about all of this and more with Yohan Lawrence. Stay tuned.
When you have an ambition, trust your instincts. Move forward. This is your moment to shape your future, to be independent, to strengthen yourself. Your time is now. Accelerate your progress. Empowering your progress for a fulfilled life. Union Assurance.
For 30 years, LMD has been the voice of business in Sri Lanka, capturing the pulse of the nation's corporate landscape through its iconic covers. Each cover tells a story, from the first edition in 1994 to the present day, narrating key moments, leaders and trends that have shaped Sri Lanka's business ecosystem. Over the years, LMD covers have featured thought leaders, business pioneers and game-changing innovations, reflecting the evolution of industries and the economy. As we celebrate 30 years, these covers represent more than just publications. They are a testament to LMD's legacy of excellence in business journalism and its unwavering commitment to being Sri Lanka's leading voice of business. LMD, Sri Lanka's voice of business, a legacy of 30 years.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. We're discussing the US tariff conundrum today, and I'm here with Yohan Lawrence, the Secretary General of Joint Apparel Association Forum. Yohan, welcome to our show.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me.
Starting off, actually, where to start is a good question. The apparel industry has been facing several headwinds recently, and now we have the latest blow, which is the 30% tariff on top of prevailing tariffs, of course. I know it sounds seriously bad, but can you tell us how bad it is, how serious it is?
Sure. So yeah, so I agree. Over the last many years, Sri Lanka as a country and the sector has faced continuous challenges from one to the other. The US tariff one is a big challenge to us. And I think the point is that the 30% tariff, which is what is the currently indicated number, if things stand where they are, will be a serious problem for us. So Sri Lanka, we look at countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia as kind of countries with whom we compete for US business. And if you take those countries, then Vietnam has got a deal at 20%. India is rumored to be around 10 or 11. Philippines this morning was talked of as around 19. So the challenge for Sri Lanka is, where does that our number end up in relation to the number of these competing countries? I know I didn't include Philippines, but with Philippines coming in at such a low level, that will automatically create interest. So the important thing for Sri Lanka is to make sure that between now and the 1st of August, which is the deadline, that we are able to negotiate a deal that brings us into a closer level with our competitor countries. Obviously, doesn't need to be exactly the same, but if the spread of the tariff rates between these countries is small, then it's manageable. If the spread is large, then what will happen is industry will, US business will move to countries that have lower tariffs. If you take Vietnam, for example, a number of brands who manufacture in Sri Lanka, will also manufacture in Vietnam. So they already have an established supply chain. They already have approved, compliant factories that are already approved in their systems. So in those instances, the switch is going to be very easy to make. If it's a country like India, I mean, India is also big into the US, but that would be a more medium-term threat. But the Vietnam one is an immediate threat because, as I say, for most of the brands buying out of Sri Lanka, it's something which they could switch to
easily.
Additionally, whilst the US is 40% of our business, it's also important to note that there's a number of brands we will then ship to third-party countries. So, for example, if we're making for a US brand in Sri Lanka and that brand has an outlet in China or Korea or Australia, we will ship directly to there. So, actually, the US number is in fact bigger than the 40% that we talk of typically. Our estimate is probably 45, even as much as 50%. So, this is a significant part of our industry. And if there is a differential tariff that is significant, then our US business will move to those countries. Some products in the shorter term, some products in the longer term. So yeah, it's a big challenge.
Big challenge. And even from what you said, we still have time to make this slightly better.
That's correct. So if you look at the letter that President Trump sent out to our president, the one that's very much on social media, so what it's saying is, okay, look, you have, if you don't do a deal between now and the 1st of August, this is where you will end up. But if you read that carefully, it even talks about the fact that, this can be continuously negotiated. The US can put it up, put it down. So I think we're entering in a world where there won't be a very definite cutoff that says at this date, that's it, no more negotiations. Just like Sri Lanka is looking to negotiate, so are our other countries. So this is a moving target that, it's going to become very difficult to stick a pin in it and say that's the end of it. So I think this is going to be a debate that we're going to be having for the next few months.
Wow. And also that to get some clarity, because there are some officials who say that this is a really good deal, I mean, compared to the 40%. And then, of course, you're saying that we can do better, we should do better. As a nation, like, how good is this?
So I think the point is this, we have to acknowledge that moving from 44 to 30 is a significant step. To me, more than the number, it's a symbolic step that is a recognition of the fact that the Sri Lankan government has actively engaged with the US. We've taken an approach which is, we want to talk, we want to come to the table, we want to negotiate. And I think you have to recognize that fact that moving from 44 to 30 is a big step. However, we can't be complacent. We cannot say, okay, we're down at 30 and that's it. And I think, to be fair, what the government is saying is, yes, we've come a long way, but we will continue to negotiate. I read I think there's a delegation to the US going off, I think today or tomorrow. So this ongoing discussions with the US in terms of trying to see how we can get ourselves a deal that gives us a tariff that's lower is important. And I think it's something that is work in progress. So yeah, I think the answer is yes, it's a good step. But given where the rest of the world is moving, it's not good enough. And we have to move that needle significantly, because if we don't, if you drew a line in the sand as of today and you said, okay, Vietnam is at 20, India is at 10, 11, Philippines is at 19, Sri Lanka is at 30, then we will lose business. So it's very clear we have to do something better.
It's time now to take a very short break, but we'll soon be back to talk more about the US tariffs.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
Welcome back to the show. We're in conversation with the Secretary General of SHAF, Yohan Lawrence. And in our negotiations, what factors do you think would tip the scale in our favor?
So I think that's difficult to say because, again, we're not privy to the detail of the discussion. But again, if you go back to President Trump's letter, it talks of, increasing trade. It talks of tariff and non-tariff barriers. And these are areas that Sri Lanka has work to do on. I mean, the removal of non-tariff barriers is something which is part of government policy. It's part of the IMF agreement. So it's an opportunity for Sri Lanka to do these reforms. And I think these reform, whether they immediately have an impact on the US or not, maybe a secondary question. But I think if we're demonstrating our good faith, our intentions, and we start moving on some of these areas, then I think that will give the right signal to the US that Sri Lanka is serious about its US business. They're serious to look at what we can do. Obviously, we have IMF constraints. We have those guardrails. So we have certain restrictions that we have to work within. But I think there are things, again, if you look at that letter, it does talk of access to the market. It talks of tariff and non-tariff barriers. And I think there's work there that we can do.
Definitely. And while that work is happening, the negotiations and the discussions are happening, when you look at the apparel industry players, leaving aside the government talks, what do you think they should focus on in terms of strategy to make sure that there is profitability?
So I think, the tariff conversations have to carry on. And obviously, we have input into that. We feed to the government what is important to us. But I think what's also important in the bigger picture is making sure that we do the things that make Sri Lanka a competitive place to them. So some of the things that have been on our agenda for a number of years is things like market access. Right now, we have the EU's GSP Plus scheme, we have the UK's DCTS scheme, but those are the only, and we have ICE FTA to India. Those are the three schemes that we have in place. For Sri Lanka to continue to have sustainable growth, we have to look at other markets as well. That's just good business.
Yes.
But to do that, we need to be able to compete with other countries on an even playing field. The good thing about the US up to now, up until the Liberation Day came in, was we competed shoulder to shoulder with Bangladesh, Vietnam. Nobody had a better deal.
Yeah.
When we look at other markets, you look at Australia, you look at Japan, you look at South Korea, you look at Canada, all of these are markets which we see as having great potential. Our competitor countries have some form of preferential market access. So one of our biggest tasks has been that we deal with this issue and we start looking at it and we start looking to getting effective trade deals done with countries that can support it. On the local side, we have to be conscious of local costs. We have to be conscious that we need an electricity tariff that is competitive in the region. It needs to be stable. It needs to be predictable. Right now, you have a tariff that varies, plus 20, minus 15. It's very difficult to compete. Other countries don't have this. We have a commitment that the country has made for renewable energy. Our belief is that the more we unlock renewable energy, the lower the pricing will come down. The lower pricing then becomes stable pricing. So we have to move on things like that. We have to move on labor reform. Our labor laws are archaic, are well overdue and overhaul. We have to move on these things. When you have companies who are trying to set up factories here, build factories, the BOI has a negative list. That means you have to buy raw materials at higher prices. So things like that makes Sri Lanka uncompetitive have to be dealt with. We have a shipping industry that hasn't been liberalized. There are, apart from the conversations on the tariff, there are a whole range of things that Sri Lanka needs to be doing to make Sri Lanka a more competitive place for investment, so that if an existing company wants to grow or a new investor wants to come in, they look at the offer that Sri Lanka has versus other country and they say, yeah, I'm going to put my business in Sri Lanka. So we have to get to that point. Right now, there isn't a lot on the table. Some of that is obviously, I understand, IMF thing. So the standardization of corporate income tax rates, for example. Sri Lanka has a history of having a dual rate income tax system that encourages companies to move into exports. We've now done away with that, and we have an income tax rate that's way above our competitor countries.
Exactly.
So these are factors that any investor will look at and
Before
will take that decision. So there's only so much that we can do. We have to create this environment that attracts investment.
It sounds like a lot of doom and gloom unless we get our act together. But then, like you said, the UK is showing some kind of positive.
Yeah, so I think there are two things. I mean, so if you take the UK scheme, there's an announcement that was made in the last week that's going to work very closely. It's going to help countries like Sri Lanka. And, this is something that we at JAF have been working very closely directly with the UK trade representatives to understand, sort of give them the an understanding of the landscape here, what we can do, what we can't do, and lobby to make sure that that scheme allows us to get the best use out of it. So the announcement from the UK was incredibly encouraging because what it's saying is it'll allow us to widen the pool of countries from which we can source. It'll allow us to get better utilization out of the scheme. It'll help the UK customer because it'll deliver goods to them at a lower price. It'll help factories here to help them to grow sustainably. So there are some signs and things. We obviously have the EU scheme as well. That's our single biggest trading scheme that we have. It's an important part of our trading network. That scheme comes up for renewal in 2027, so we have to work closely to make sure that we can continue to qualify for the scheme when it comes up for renewal in 2027. So you have to work with protecting your existing markets on the one hand, and you then also have to work at looking at new markets on the other hand.
Lots of work to be done.
Yeah, keeps us busy.
Thank you, Yohan. Thank you very much. We've been in conversation with Yohan Lawrence, the Secretary General of Joint Apparel Association Forum. Thank you very much for a very insightful discussion, Yohan.
You're very welcome, and thank you for asking me.
And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and X. Thank you for watching and stay safe.